Hello, and it's the last day of our chapter 24 going through Australia and the Pacific Islands. I wish we could do more together on this, but we are winding down to the end of our school year. We're not going to do section 4 on Antarctica. We're just going to stop it at section 3. But I thought before we get into the textbook that we would talk about Haka, which is, we talked about Australia yesterday with the Google Earth tour, which I hope you did. But Haka, does any of you guys know what Haka is? So Haka is something that is Maori tradition, that is New Zealand indigenous peoples. It is, Encyclopedia Britannica describes it as a posture dance that involves the entire body in vigorous rhythmic movements, swaying, slapping of the chest, thighs, stamping, and gestures of stylized violence, accompanied by a chant and fierce facial expressions such as bulging eyes and the sticking out of the tongue. Haka is performed by men and women, social functions, battle preparations back in the day, but now can be used for birthdays, weddings, funerals, other celebratory events. And so Haka is something that's very important in New Zealand culture. And I'm going to attach 2 videos to this besides this video where you'll see New Zealand men doing Haka. The first one will be at a sporting event. The rugby team does Haka for the visiting team, and then another at an all-boys school for a teacher that's retiring. And wouldn't that be interesting if our Emmanuel boys basketball team decided to start their game with Haka? Oh, that would be an interesting sight to see. But yes, it is a very cultural, significant thing to people in Australia, not Australia, New Zealand. So today we are going to go over economy and the environment. So I'm just zooming out of my page here so I can get it all on my screen. So Australia and New Zealand are way more advanced economically than the other countries in this area. Australia's major industries are agriculture, mining, tourism, and manufacturing. Australia, because it's close to Asia, exports a lot of resources to countries in Asia. And many Australian businesses are secondary industries. What are secondary industries? According to your textbook, secondary industries involve the use of resources to create new products, as occurs in manufacturing. So, Australia's highly educated population and advanced technology has helped build up new products using resources in manufacturing, so secondary industry. It has a wealthy economy, high economic output per person, first world country. And you can see here down at this graph at the bottom of page 849, a lot of Australia's economy comes from service industries and industry. Farming is actually not where they get a lot of their money compared to the Pacific Islands, where service industries and agriculture are a big chunk of their economy and industry is a smaller chunk. Don't really have a lot of factories on those small islands. So New Zealand's economy is similar, although it is smaller. It is a smaller country, smaller population. Industry, tourism are very valuable. They raise cows and sheep for meat, dairy, and wool products. Sheep farming dominated New Zealand's economy for decades. 20 sheep for every 1 New Zealander, it used to be. Sheep wool and meat made up the most important industry from 1856 to 1987, dropping in the 1990s as dairy farming increased. In 1982, New Zealand was home to 70 million sheep. In 2007, there's only 39 million sheep. That's a lot of sheep. They're able to have different types of sheep: highland sheep, which are better in the hills, and lowland sheep. European settlers first raised sheep on the drier eastern side of the South Island. gradually expanding to wetter North Island as the Maori living there lost more of their land. So, in the Pacific Islands, they rely on primary industries. So collecting resources. So primary industries, they're collecting the resources. Secondary industries, they're taking the resources to make something new. Agriculture and fishing are very important for the Pacific Island primary industries. Islands have joined together to create the Pacific Islands Forum. By working together, they can attract international business and tourism to their islands, improving their economy. It's time for the Dutch word for Thursday. The Dutch word for Thursday is doei, like do-e, do-e. Doei. Can you say it? Doei. Guess what that means? It means goodbye. So if you're saying goodbye to someone, you can say doei. In fact, that's how Mr. Bulwark says goodbye to his mom whenever he talks to her on the phone. Doei. He says that. And so you can say that when you're saying goodbye to people. So make sure you have this down. Doei, the Dutch word for Thursday. This region of the world has a lot of tourism. People are attracted to Australia's coast, New Zealand's beautiful nature, and the tropical paradise that are these Pacific Islands. And so they rely on having clean sandy beaches and clear blue water. Agriculture and fishing also require these natural resources. With such an emphasis placed on having a clean environment, healthy environment for tourism and for agriculture, they have to deal with a lot of environmental challenges. The main one for Australia is drought. Australia, with its 3 deserts, is the driest inhabited continent. That means the driest continent that people live on. In a lot of recent years, they've been affected by drought. Drought is a long period of extremely dry weather. Drought caused Australia's farms to not be able to produce as much, and they had smaller harvests. It also has increased the amount of wildfires in the area, as not a lot of water and a lot of dry causes fire to burn. Climate change is also a problem. Climate change is a long-term, significant change to a region's average weather. Air pollution can be a factor of this, but climate change can cause a rise in sea level. The melting of glaciers, even though they're not completely close, and the warming and expansion of water can cause the sea level to rise, maybe as much as 2 feet by 2100, which might not seem like a big deal, but many of the people in the Pacific live near sea level. So that would affect their area of what, that would affect the area of where they're allowed to live. Global climate change can also increase the amount of severe storms that you can get, which can push water further onto land, causing the lands to be eroded. Which makes me want to look at disappearing islands on the previous page. In recent years, higher global temperatures have led to the melting of glaciers. Also, as water warms, it expands. Melting ice and expanding water have raised global sea levels. In the Pacific region, many people live close to sea level. Tuvalu is a group of 9 tiny islands, 2,500 miles northeast of Australia. Its highest point is only 15 feet above sea level, and most land is just a few feet above sea level. As global sea levels rise, Tuvalu, with its 9,600 residents, is slowly sinking. And look at it in this picture. It says that about 2100, large chunks of Tuvalu might be gone. Already has a lot of flooding. High tides flood. Waves from strong storms wash over Tuvalu's largest island. Rising levels of salt water kill the crops and threaten livestock, and residents are wanting to move to Australia in order to have to deal with this constant flooding. Some other economic activities can cause environmental harm, such as mining, where you are putting chemicals into the water and soil. Also, nuclear weapons testing. The United States, France, and United Kingdom tested weapons in this area from 1940s to 1990s. A nuclear weapon is a powerful explosive device that can cause widespread destruction. It can also cause harmful long-term effects on the people and the ecosystems, with the raising amount of radiation setting off these nuclear weapons can cause. My book talks about Bikini Atoll, one of the most notorious nuclear testing grounds in the Pacific Islands. Between 1946 and 1958, while under the administration of the U.S. Navy and before it became part of the Marshall Islands, this group of approximately 20 small coral islands became the site of Operation Crossroads, an experiment that tested the effects of both airborne and underwater nuclear bombs on naval vessels. The operation required 167 indigenous people to leave the islands. In 1956, a U.S. plane dropped a hydrogen bomb on the atoll. Decades later, radioactivity levels remained dangerously high on Bikini Atoll, making U.S. efforts at resettlement impossible. After a lawsuit was brought against the United States in the 1980s by Bikini Islanders, U.S. cleanup efforts began, the first which was completed in 1998. Today, some tourist activity, including diving, is allowed. So, big damage to the environment. All right, tomorrow you have homework that you can work on. Make sure you watch those Haka videos. It's just a very interesting part of their culture. And at this time, I gotta say, Dewey!